Hey, welcome back to another Plat Chat Valorant First Strike preview. Today we're going to be going through G2. They are the top team over in Europe. It's a really fun team to watch, and I think this one, with the Valorant video about Sentinels, I felt like, okay, most of our audience is already going to be familiar with Sentinels. I genuinely think that there are some people that don't watch Europe very much, even though G2 is obviously so incredible, that they just look at the rankings and they're like, oh, G2 is just a kind of a super team. They're just crushing everybody in Europe, and they don't pay that much like actual attention and watch the tournaments.
Yeah. It wasn't actually up until that last Final Ignition Series event in EU that I think EU finally started getting the shine that it absolutely deserves for the level of play that they've had.
Yeah.
I mean, since the beginning of the game at this point. But yeah, it was really up until then. I think, if I remember correctly, the finals there, FPX versus G2, I think it cracked 100K.
Yeah.
So finally, the light that they deserve, because yeah, they are damn good. I mean, it is such a well-rounded team. And for those who might be familiar with Sentinels but not G2, I think there are a lot of similarities to
Yeah.
draw, really, in terms of how well-rounded they are. I think it's sort of an interesting dynamic that the star player in my eyes of G2 being Ardis, he has a lot of interesting similarities in a way to Shazam, where they sort of have
Sure.
similar roles. They're both great at rifling, great at opping, also the leaders of the team. They play similar agents with the Sova and the Jett. But Ardis, for my money and for a lot of other people's, I'd imagine, is probably your number one player in the world right now. At least, certainly an argument to be made there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason for this being is that when he was on his previous team, Fish123, the guy showcased the fact that he can play ops at an outrageous level, like an unbelievably good level. And then he's moved over onto more of a supportive role here. Like
Yeah.
Mixwell is really the star of G2 in terms of like the guy that they put in the positions to get the frags, you know? He's the guy that always takes the Jett, always takes the op, is kind of put in positions to get the kills. But and then Ardis is playing that secondary fragger on the team. I mean, for starters though, I feel like well, anyway, let's talk a little bit more about Ardis then, because the guy is obviously very flexible. He's played the Jett and the Brimstone in the past on Fish123. He's played a majority Sova, but he does play the Raze whenever he's on Split as well, because you don't play Sova on Split, at least not in the current metagame. And he also is, I want to say the IGL for the team, but at the same time, what's wonderful about G2 is that they've streamed a lot of their matches. And it's not as simple as CS, where there's often one big player calling a lot of the rotates and the shots. I think some of the NA teams still have that kind of structure, but in Europe, from what I can gather, well, actually, maybe that's not fair, because Liquid does have one primary IGL. But certainly on G2, a lot of people contribute to the calling. They seemed like when they put this team together, they picked up a lot of players that weren't just really good at the game, but were very vocal, very good at being able to make like plays individually between themselves, and all had some kind of leadership ability within the game. So even though Ardis is probably the most vocal player in terms of rotations around the map and stuff like that, everybody has moments where they call. Like David P calls a lot of the plays on Haven. I know that Mixwell calls a lot when he's not AWPing as well. Pith will occasionally make calls too. So yeah, this is very much like a joint effort, but Ardis is, if you had to call someone the IGL, you would say that it was Ardis.
Yeah, absolutely. And touching on the fact that they are so good in terms of their communication as a unit, it is a fully international team. I mean, it's the first international super team, really, in the game,
Yeah.
which obviously, if you compare to CS, it took a long time for that to begin to happen in CSGO. But for G2, they initially started this roster with getting Mixwell, who was a beta star player.
Yeah.
I mean, he looked good on multiple roles, even the Viper, which was
Yeah.
interesting. And hey, maybe we'll see that in the future. But it started with him, and then they just slowly accrued these pieces from other teams, the standouts from these other
Yeah.
teams,
Yeah.
right? Where they signed Ardis over from Fish123, signed Patty Tech, David P. Pitt, and through their decision to actually take time and form the roster, from the organizational standpoint. That is a major key as well as to why they are so good. They
Yes,
did not
absolutely.
rush into signing a roster. They got one star player and then they put the requisite funds towards the requisite players to build this international super team.
Yeah, and specifically, Carlos, the CEO of G2, was messaging these other guys. I think there's like a public tweet about the Patitech one, where he said to Patitech, don't sign with anybody. If you get offers, I don't care, come to me before you sign something, because I'll pay you more to be on my team. And so they genuinely did sign a super team at the same time as a lot of North American organizations were signing groups of pre-made teams. Like, I like to talk about this in terms of natural selection, where I feel like, all right,
Yes,
bear with me here. Bear with me here. Where
Yeah,
it's like,
I'm rolling.
if you watch how people play and you only pick the best pieces, it's like the strong surviving and you're able to pick the best parts. And so being able to see players actually perform in tournaments and only select the best, it's a selection process. There's actually some force at play there. Whereas a lot of the other orgs, not necessarily in Europe, but a lot in North America, signed whole teams, and some that hadn't even gone through that process of rising to the top. And so you're never being selective with the pieces that you've got, because you're just banking on the fact that the teams themselves actually did a good job of creating those rosters in the first place. And that's never what G2 did. Like, right from the beginning, they actually ran an ignition series that was all of the top European teams. You're broken up. You're just playing pugs, essentially. I don't know how much that actually came into the scouting of G2, but it's undeniable that they formed the first super team in the game. Like, for example, the reason why a lot of people... Well, actually, let's set some context first. G2 have basically been playing one composition this whole time. Like, they have been playing Mixwell on Jett, Ardis on Sova, Patitech on Omen, David P on Sage, and then Pith on Cypher. Now, they have made some changes to that. Like, occasionally, Pith has been playing the Killjoy recently. When they play Split, Ardis plays the Raze, as previously mentioned. And David P, after the Sage nerf, has been playing some Breach as well. But the crucial element to this is you shouldn't think of G2 as a one-trick team, because all of these players on their previous teams were playing totally different agents, and in some cases, massively different roles as well. Patitech is a great example. He was a full CIS team's Star Phoenix player. Like, real flashy aim, creative, a kind of entry fragging, but also playing like an information acquisitional role. And in this team, he's very supportive. He plays the Omen, he's flashing for people, he's playing kind of at the back, and then he'll sometimes playmake and be able to deliver with his incredible aim. But these guys have all played different heroes, different agents in previous teams. And it's clear that this roster has like outrageous skill to it just on every player.
Yeah. I mean, that's really it is such an interesting point that both Ardis and Patitech were star players on their previous team, and now on this super team that is winning everything in Europe up until this point, they are both on supportive roles, and they're doing so well on them, which also to an extent speaks to sort of like the lack of ego on some of these players, thinking in terms of just being a well-rounded team and succeeding as the unit, right? But I think a sort of an interesting comparison as well to draw to Sentinels, the two teams in the two different regions who are winning everything, you see them playing the same comps on the same maps over and over because they are winning, not because they are lacking in versatility. As you said, G2 have a massive amount of versatility. And it's something we sort of touched on in the Sentinels video, but in Valorant, there are going to be new agents, new maps, updates, ability changes constantly. And G2 are another team that are set up to succeed in that. In terms of, not just versatility with composition, versatility with role on the team, and also versatility in terms of who needs to be calling in what role, the communication structure. They're just so fluid. They're so open. And in terms of their individual skill with them being well-rounded, when you're watching G2, it feels as though no matter what situation they're in, if the camera switches to the defender, a G2 defender on any point in the map, and you see a couple attacking players going towards them, you think he is always going to get a multi-kill. All of them are capable of getting multi-kills in just about any situation on defense.
Yeah.
The skill level is so insane. Even on Pith, who's obviously the direct hard support player, being on Cypher, I mean, that is
Yeah.
just the role. He just pulls off magical multi-kills, anchoring sites. He's so good at integrating with his aim, not only just these great sprays, but he'll just suddenly start tapping with the Vandal onto the next player.
Yeah.
He's so effective at using the spray, the tap, and the burst with the rifles. It's something I don't actually see a lot of other players doing,
Yep.
but he looks so good. And actually, for me, Pith is my favorite player on the team.
Really?
He
Why is
is.
that?
It's because the one thing I love, one of the things I love in Valorant in terms of the players and their histories and their story, I love seeing the players who have been able to rejuvenate themselves, like breathe new
Sure.
life into themselves as competitors in this game. And he is one of those people to me. It was so long ago. I think it was like 2015 that he was on NIP, the original one. It was after
Sure.
Fiflaren had left. And 2015 was actually his best year statistically in CS. And since then, once that NIP team disbanded, he had just never really found his footing. But he kept trying for years and years, but could just never really get the right fit. He was never succeeding at the same level. But he never actually gave up. He kept playing. And upon switching to this game, he just looks so good. And it's just so cool to see someone like that succeed
Sure.
in this game
Yeah.
for like it might sound silly, but like for the right reasons. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
he is a genuine competitor, and he looks so good. I mean, he's just like, again, same as all the other players. He just brings such a high level of consistency. He is such a rock on defense. It's
really
so
is.
hard to take sides when he's there.
While we're talking about Pith, I think it bears mentioning that Ardis has been very vocal on Twitter saying that the NA teams have so many bad players on their teams. And what he means by that is every NA team that you look at, you can point to a weak link. I mean, the only one where you really couldn't that much is Sentinels, I suppose, the team that we've already done a video about. And even there, people would point to Zombs as the weak link of that team. On G2, there is no weak link. I mean that in a very complete and literal sense, is that if you had to choose the lowest fragging or lowest impact player on the team, I mean, maybe it's Pith, but the guy is in the conversation for the best in his role in the world. Like, that's crazy. This team does not have a weak link individually whatsoever. And I'm looking at the numbers from some of these guys as well, because I got the VLR links pulled up. I was just taking a look at Ardis, man, because like you say, he's a star player that's had to play more of a kind of supportive role on the team, but is thriving in it as well. As soon as he goes over to the Raze, which is more of a duelist, when he's playing on Split, he has a 0.97 kill per round. Like, he's good for a kill every single round.
Man,
I mean, those stats are outrageous, just bonkers. And his KD's fantastic as well. Now, a player that I really love on this team, actually, is David P. And the reason for that is he really plays such a unique style. I wasn't really around at the beginning of CSGO to see Get Right play, but from the way that people describe Get Right in this like hardcore lurking role, often using his intelligence to time people and get like a 3k spray down at the end of a round, this kind of stuff, like the real god tier player at the very beginning of the game, the way that they describe him is very similar to the way I think about David P. He's always going to be trying to push for intelligence. He's always confident in his own duels, but his timing is also perfect for being able to lurk in and get behind people. And people across Europe now refer to basically any hardcore flank as a David P play. They'll literally just say that in the middle of the game, even if they're not playing against G2. They're like, oh, that guy's going for a David P. You know, like, that's the kind of impact that he's had upon the European scene, is because it's so unique. He's even had to pull that back a lot because people expect it from him all the time now. But he still gets away with it in crucial situations because his timing is just that damn good.
Yeah. And it's one of the reasons as well, he still runs the stage on Ascent, which is, you would think, not necessarily the go-to map for Sage.
Sure.
But yeah, he's still able to do that on Sage on Ascent. I think my biggest question for David P moving forward is just how he's going to be on the breach over the long term, what he's going to slot into. Obviously, there's a new agent as well, Sky, coming into the game. How will she factor? But it'll be interesting to see where he fills in, because though I was a huge fan of him on Sage, it did seem in the most recent Ignition Series event, in that final versus FPX, which was, came down to the wire, just a sick series. I wasn't fully convinced of him on Breach in the same way that I was on his Sage.
Definitely
So
agree.
I am interested in seeing where he goes in terms of his role with the team moving forward.
Yeah.
Or maybe they try to kind of integrate more Sage on Split perhaps, or more maps than just Ascent,
Yeah.
if it remains something that works for them.
I totally agree with you. I think the Breach is definitely an agent that he is learning, and really he is the outlier, actually. It's kind of David P and Pith are the two that I don't think have as much versatility in terms of agents that they've played before in the past, and specifically David P. Like, I don't really know what his agent pool looks like outside of the Sage, and I think he's actively learning and broadening his agent pool. He was one of the 3 players. It's like David P., Sync and Sync. What am I talking about? Sick and Link. I just combined their names there as well. Were like the 3 people who were playing Sage the most and the most religiously. And of the 3 of them, David P has showcased the least flexibility outside of that. So I suppose earlier when we were talking about everyone on G2 having big agent pools, really David P is actually a bit of an outlier here, in that he doesn't. But yeah, I'm interested to see how that really plays out, because the value this guy was able to find on Sage was enormous, but it seemed like he really found a playstyle that fit with him and fit with the agent. So yeah, that is a bit of a question mark moving forwards for G2, whether they can keep up this kind of reign of dominance with Sage being nerfed. But they have won the most recent tournament even post-Sage nerfs as well. I think then we should talk about the style of the team itself now, Wyatt, because I think about G2 as a team that has very little predetermined plans going into a match, but they are beautiful at adapting to their opponent and finding the weaknesses of their opponent and making on-the-fly calls from any player on the team to abuse those weaknesses during the round.
Yeah, I think that how we were kind of describing David P and what he's able to do in terms of his flanks and his timing mid-round, making those decisions, is sort of a metaphor for the team overall. How they're able to expose these weaknesses mid-round, and specifically on attack. Their fluid rotating is perhaps the best in the game. I mean, I think it is the best in the game right now. They are so good at rotating throughout the map. And the issue with them as well, if you're playing into them on defense, is one of the same. I feel that they're so good at understanding the map control in terms of where the enemy teams are attacking and where to rotate off of. There are a lot of situations where they're able to like effective. I always have in my mind the way that they sort of play split A. They're very lenient with how they hold down heaven oftentimes, because they're so good at catching the timing of getting players over into the B side heaven and holding that down. They're so intelligent at using the spawn and rotating on that map. And that's sort of always something that stands out to me when I'm watching them, is that their rotations are just the best.
Yeah, they are. And for me, a lot of that comes down to Ardis and his calling. He is often the guy that's going to be calling those rotates between sites and timings as well. And each player individually understands timings incredibly. We've already talked about how David P does it. But when I listen to their comms, which again is a wonderful insight to being able to understand how this team functions, Ardis a lot of the time is the guy calling where people could be on the map. Like, you'll often hear him saying, like, they could have timinged us with a certain push in here. It seems like their players are hyper aware of which areas of the map people were watching and which areas of the map were open to the opponents for a specific amount of time. And that constant fluid communication from all of their players and a almost like bird's eye awareness of where their opponents even could be leads them to just dominate other teams when it comes to the map control game, and an understanding of which bomb sites they're going to and the rotations around the map and this kind of stuff. It's very smart. Ardis will sometimes just go for hard reads on opponents as well, in terms of like he just gets in the head of the enemy IGL and just predicts where they're going based on what ults are up or the things that he's seen earlier on in the round. They're very good at being able to recognize what people's set defaults are. Like a certain recon arrow will land and they understand exactly what the opponents are going for. They're just 5 really smart guys all on the same team. Plus they can all frag incredibly well. But I'd like to talk a little bit, Wyatt, about the set plays of this team. Because when you compare this team to an FPX or a Vision Strikers, or hell, even a Sentinels actually in some ways, they don't really have a deep playbook, right? It's kind of made up on the fly because they feel so good about doing that because they're so good at the game.
Yeah, that's sort of what I was getting at as well with my previous point. The rotations on attack are so fluid. They are so good in terms of using their utility to cut off certain angles where Patty Tech will place his smokes on the Omen just to block off certain angles, certain crosses that they'll make, the way that they're able to play Ascent mid. They're so intelligent with the utility usage mid-round to actually gain map control and just either gain the map control and then use it as a fake, or obviously just use it to push into a site. Their timings with all that are so good. And then as well, something I love about them on defense is when they decide to go for an aggressive early round play as well. Like Ardis, when he's on Raze, the moments where he'll just blast pack in at the very beginning of the round. There will be times where he'll just double blast pack on the Raze, on split through like B main, and he'll just land right in front of the team, and it'll be timinged with a Patty Tech paranoia going through the wall to blind them. Like they have those are the kind of little setup plays that they have, right?
Yeah.
It's little things like that to get kills, which is sort of reminiscent in a way of a Vision Strikers type set play.
Sure, yeah, I suppose I should be more specific because they actually do have a range of small set plays that they use across a lot of their rounds, where one player will be just coordinating with 1 or 2 other players in order to take some piece of map control or set up a kill. Their playbook in terms of those is really deep. Like they are so smart that they have, I don't know, 10 different tiny set plays that they can pull on any map in the pool. But what I meant by them not having a particularly deep playbook and going more off intuition is that they don't normally go for like big site executes. It's not like they have a plan at the beginning of the round of like, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to execute it. Let's go. And you see all of these different pieces in motion. Instead, they have these small set plays between the players that they can just call on the fly. It's kind of audible calls, right? Where they'll go, oh, we need to, the round has played out where we want to attack A. Let's run this kind of play that we've previously run. But they don't come into the round with a set strategy, I feel. They're very much fluid.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, those micro set plays that we're talking about, those are the plays that will get them the pick that they need to win the round. But the round win will come off the back of fluid pushes and gaining map control using utility intelligently. Yes, it's never just some massive site execute. And you have to think as well, a lot of credit goes to a lot of round wins to Mixwell as well. Just seeing where he's able to actually open up rounds in terms of his opping.
Definitely.
Jett. I mean, he's incredible with the opping Jett. I mean, so many moments in my mind I can run back of him just shutting down teams on Ascent defense, just holding down mid. I mean, he's really been a key for them so far, which is also sort of an interesting point moving forward, obviously, since the op nerf discussion is such a prevalent one. Obviously, when you think about that, most people's minds will drift to like Wardell or TSM, but that should be influential here on G2 moving forward as well. I mean, Mixwell's pretty much exclusively been on Jett the entire time. I mean, he's literally Jett on every map, right? For how many months now?
Yeah, for a long time. I think
several months.
I think it's literally been every game of G2 he has played the Jett since he joined the team. I mean, you look at his VLR.GG profile, and basically he's played like the Viper 7 times, is the most played agent outside of his Jett. But again, this is a factor of him just winning constantly on it. I think he could play pretty much any agent they needed him to play. And I actually think that even though the AWP has been nerfed, and Jett's ultimate has been nerfed as well, they'll still run the Jett quite a lot of the time, because G2 are very good, and Mixwell is very good at being able to get value out of the Jett without just being an op 1 trick. He does op a lot, but his rifling is very, very strong. And the usage of Jett, he's very selfless with how he engages on the attack. He's not one of those Jetts that will just sit there with an op on attack and wait for a pick to be delivered to him, or wait for his team to be able to bust into an area and then op. He's going to take a rifle on attack most of the time, and he's going to dash into sights and create that space for his team to follow up, which is a style that'll work even with the op and Jett nerfs, obviously. I think that it's very smart play from Mixwell. Like, he was somebody that recognized what TenZ was doing with Jett early on in the life cycle of Valorant, both in terms of the entrying with the dash and also the judge gameplay. And he just soaks up stuff. Like, he just learns stuff and executes it in games, and it's always very fast. So I think G2 could still run the Jett even with the op nerfs, but even if they don't, I feel like they are gonna be able to come up with stuff. They are a very smart team.
Yeah, absolutely. I think actually, the majority of his op play really was on defense, where he was able to win them rounds from just hard getting opening kills on defense, which you still can do to an extent, right? But I mean, we'll see how that works. It's obviously going to be tougher to be as aggressive as a defensive op.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the way he would play Jett on offense. I mean, I think that really is the optimal way to play Jett.
Yeah. Go on.
Okay, but I was going to say, I think probably the interesting talking point as well moving forward with them, aside from just the game balance changes, obviously the rivalry between them and FPX and how we think that might play out moving forward. Because FPX has been on their heels since the team was birthed like a month and a half ago or so. They've just been slowly improving. You could see it tournament by tournament. They were getting closer and closer to potentially beating them, where that culminated in that last Ignition Series grand final, where they barely lost. It was the closest G2 had ever been pushed. And I felt previous to that tournament that it's only a matter of time until FPX gets a win. But obviously yet to happen, but perhaps First Strike could be the first time it does.
Yeah, absolutely. G2, even though for starters, how have we not mentioned this yet? They have not lost a BO3 in the history of Valorant. I mean, G2 haven't been a team since the very beginning, but Ardis himself has never lost a BO3 in the whole of Valorant history. He's played since the beginning of the beta, and every team that Ardis has been on has not lost a BO3. Fish123 didn't, and then as soon as he moved to G2, G2 also didn't. So that in itself is insane dominance, especially in a region that's as good as Europe. Like, that is crazy.
Nothing is going to make me mauled if more than hearing people say that they're just dominating because there isn't competition in Europe. That is so far from the truth. It is unbelievable how wrong that is. The talent level in Europe is out of control. G2 just genuinely did put together an unbelievable team.
Yes.
And obviously Ardis is just an unbelievable player right now.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like, the team is such an excellent collection of talent, and they put that team together before a lot of other good European teams had combined that talent. But FPX are, like, on their level in terms of the individual skill, and now they've played together enough that they're catching up to them. But, okay, G2 haven't lost a BO3 in their history, but it doesn't feel like they're untouchable. They're not that far ahead of the competition, but it seems like in every tight situation, they just have that clutch factor and that read of their opponent to edge it out. But if you're looking forwards to G2 in First Strike, compared to North America, where you'd say Sentinels are the clear favorite, do you believe that G2 are the clear favorite in Europe?
No. They are the favorite.
Sure.
But, I mean, if they play FPX right now, I mean, maybe it's like a 60-40. I mean, it is close.
Very close. I think 60-40 is even pushing it.
55-45. Yeah. And then I was being a little generous because they're so damn good. But that might be pushing it. It is unbelievably close. And obviously, the major difference is that FPX is a newer team, right? So there was going to be some period of time where they were adjusting and getting used to each other anyway.
Sure.
where G2 is a bit more already in that comfort zone. And now with all of these updates that have come over the past few weeks, there's just going to be, I don't want to say a hard reset, but there is going to be some sort of reset button hit where people are going to have to learn how to adapt to the changes to the game.
And I mean, of course, all of these recent changes have not affected FPX at all. I know that we haven't gone through that team. We certainly will in one of our upcoming videos. But needless to say, the Jett changes and Op changes and Sage changes. Well, guess what? FPX don't run Jett and they don't run Sage and they don't even Op that much anyway. They're much more of like a set play kind of team, play a slower style. So it doesn't hurt FPX. It should just tilt things in their favor. So for G2, things only get more difficult from here. At the end of the day, though, it does seem crazy to say that G2 wouldn't be clear favorites when they've never lost a BO3. The level of consistency from this team is abnormal. And in a format that values consistency so highly, because you have to win all of these matches to even be able to get in, they've got to be a team that your money is on at the end of the day, even if if they have a very tight competition.
I mean, if people rate G2 too highly, you might want to get those bets in on FPX, to be honest. Well, I think the most interesting thing, we've been talking this whole time about what makes G2 good, talking about their fluid playstyle and all that. FPX are just the opposite, which is why the dynamic of them as rivals is such an interesting one.
Yeah.
G2 being this fluid team versus Angels, regimented, strategy-oriented squad is a very interesting dynamic to watch play out, especially given that the level of skill on both teams in terms of the individual play is as high as it gets in Valorant right now.
Yeah.
So that is the dynamic that makes it so captivating.
Yeah. It's going to be very interesting to watch this rivalry play out in Europe. Plus, there are many other teams that if they, made a couple of changes or shift things around or try and combine some super team together, Europe has enough talent to be able to make teams that could contest these guys as well. They're certainly not untouchable. For me, what's really interesting is, do G2 have what it takes to be able to put together more of a strategic style? Or are they always going to play loose like this? And if so, how long does it take before teams are able to beat them in that sense? Because I feel like the G2 style is predicated on them having better players than their opponents.
Yeah.
Like better players in terms of fragging, but also their read on the game. Like the reason that G2 have been so good is because their players are more intelligent than their opponents for the majority of the time and better fraggers as well. They work together really well, but it's an intuitive type of working together. It's not really based on like a preset plan coming into the game. So I think that's the kind of advantage that is catchable, Like you can,
for sure.
As the skill level of the game increases, G2's advantages decrease.
And if you want to look directly at that rivalry, if there's one player on FPX or G2 to pick for this question, which player do you think has the most growth opportunity?
Growth opportunity?
Yeah.
Out of all of G2 and FPX?
Yeah. I would say Zipan, right?
Yeah, maybe Zipan. I mean, the guy's already outrageously good, though.
Right. But just in terms of kind of who he is, right? Like new to the tactic. He came from Fortnite, obviously, right? New to the genre, still a young player, has a lot of years ahead of him, where some of these other players, they have been competing. All of G2 have come from CS. That is something I don't think we mentioned, but they all did come from CSGO. All have been competing for a fair amount of time. And I think that of all the players, Zipan, just even by virtue of being far younger than the rest of the players, he just has a bit more opportunity to grow over the following years and has less experience in the genre. That that I feel like that is the archetype of player who will eventually surpass the G2 players in terms of skill.
Yeah,
possible. It might not necessarily be Zipan, though. If there were a player on those teams to pick, I would think him. But it's going to be that type of player that eventually does, right? It's very possible. And the G2 guys are amazing, so they certainly could just reign supreme by virtue of individual skill being so high. But you have to think eventually people like that will catch up.
Yeah, what I'm also interested in with G2, though, is that whether they find a composition, whether a meta hits, basically, where G2's players are able to all play big fragging roles. Like, I don't know whether that's ever even going to be a thing in Valorant, where you don't have any supportive roles on the team. I feel like the game is probably never going to be, like, full 5 big fraggers. There just isn't room in the game for that. Like, you can't just split the frags evenly and all frag really highly. Like, what?
Yeah,
Is
right.
the game just, like, running around crazily? I don't know. But if Patatek or Ardis, for example, are able to play some kind of big fragging role alongside Mixwell, like, that might unlock even more potential from these guys. So that's something that could be very interesting moving forwards into First Strike if they figure out some comp that's even crazier like that. Anyway, I think that's about covered G2. Do you think there's anything else that's really important about this team that we haven't hit on yet?
No, I mean, I don't think so. That just about covers it. I mean, they're just, if you haven't watched them, they are the best team in the game right now, in my opinion.
Probably,
they have been since they formed with this 5-man roster. Yeah, as you said, they've never lost to BO3.
Yeah.
They are just too damn good.
Yeah, but they're not good everywhere. And I hope that this video kind of highlighted some areas where other teams might be able to catch them as well. You know, we're going to talk a lot about the strengths of other teams, the great strategy that they have, the amazing, you know, follow-up and teamwork that they have as well. Something that we don't often directly comment on is the fragging skill of the players. This cannot be overstated enough, how good G2 are at actually the rifling, the aiming, the actual killing of other people on the server. And it puts them ahead of some other teams that might be a bit ahead of them in terms of the strategy or this kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It is such a basic point of analysis. They're good at clicking on them, but they really are. Yeah, they're damn good at it, and sometimes that's all that matters.
Yeah,
I mean, it is at the end of the day, yeah, and one individual can win a round, and oftentimes that is why they win so many rounds, and that is the reason why they are so clutch. Sure. It is the reason why all these close games or close series they end up winning, because throughout, anyone on that team on any given round will just pop off. I mean, even if you go back to that very last map, the split map between FPX and them in the last Ignition series, it was the last map in the series to determine the winner. And just in the final hour, Mixwell just opping down mid, gets a collateral and then a 3K. I mean, just pops off, wins in these crucial rounds, and they get the win off the back of that. But that's the skill that any of the players on the team have, just at any given moment.
Yeah, absolutely. A phenomenal team, a really fun team to watch as well, with David P's wild flanking style and the rest of them all making micro plays around the map. It's not quite as explosively aggressive as a team like Sentinels, where it's led by like a clear wild entry fragger and other people following up, but it's very cerebral and a lot of really cool stuff that you'll see whenever you watch G2 play. And they should have some pretty close series as well when they play against other elite European talent. So yeah, if you want to watch potentially the best team in the world play, go and follow G2. These guys are wildly good at what they do. We'll be coming at you with more First Strike preview videos, taking a look at various other teams from other regions. If you're already following NA and Europe and you're like, Josh, I already know about Sentinels and G2, you big dumb bald boy, then we're going to be doing some videos about Korea and Brazil as well.
We can still get sponsors, thank God. All right,
we can, we're going to be doing some videos about Korean and Brazilian teams as well. And I know that most of you don't follow those regions, so that'll still be interesting for you guys. The next video I think we're going to do is about Vision Strikers, who are the best team in Korea. So keep your eyes open for that. Hit the subscribe button on this brand new channel, and we will see you later.